welcome to another edition of the Honest Hour. Let's keep it on very low. Might be a little bit annoying, but I don't know. That tune kind of reminded me of the March of the Scientist Robots. is how I describe that, the way that affected me, and why I chose it for today's talk. Which subject is the title of today's talk is Atheism is a Naive, Irresponsible Belief. I'm sure that will raise a lot of hackles among those who consider themselves atheists. So I apologize, but I am going to set out to prove what I have asserted, and it's up to you to refute that proof and not throw stones at me for making a defensible assertion. Okay, so in honest fashion, let's start out with defining what atheism is. Now, if you ask most atheists what atheism is, they will say, well, it's somebody who doesn't believe in God and think that they've given you everything you need to know right then and there. Well, that is naive. It is childish, because you can't define something by something you don't believe in. You have to have an idea of God before you can say you don't believe in it. So the next question to the atheist is, okay, what is God? And they will say, well, it's the God of the Bible, or Jesus, or whatever is their favorite God that they want to cast aspersion on, Allah or whatever. Okay, so you're not really atheist, because you're just against one God. Does that mean that you'd be okay with many gods? Well, no, we're against all gods. Ah, okay. So you don't believe there are any gods. I got it. So, if there are no gods, who created all the order you see around you? You say, oh, of course it was science. Ah, the natural laws of the universe. Oh, okay. Who wrote those natural laws? Who left the clues there for you to test and prove? Is your God science? Is your God the great scions of science? Tesla? Einstein? What do you believe in if you don't believe in any Theism comes from the word theology, which is, what is theology, folks? It is the lore of creation, essentially. How we got here, the meaning of life. If you don't believe in theology, then you don't believe that creation exists, I guess. Whoa, then they say, well, no, actually, it was created by consciousness. Some of them will go that direction. Oh, okay. What is consciousness? And then they might, start going down the New Age route and say, well, there's like this universal consciousness that we're all experiencing and living out, and that's what's causing the order in creation we see all around us. Oh, okay. So you're saying we're all God, or all gods. And they'll look at you a little bit and, no, that's not what I said. Well, then what do you worship? What do you really believe in? You believe in science? Okay, how do you prove science? What is science? Can you explain to me what science is? Because I'm just this dumb spiritual teacher who's only got a degree in physics. and spent his whole career working in science and engineering. So explain to me what science is. And they will start to hem and haw. And, well, it's the established theories that define what we know as the truth. Okay, and how do theories get established? We'll say we do experiments and we make a conjecture and this becomes the truth because nobody can refute it. Ah, okay. So, would you say that classical mechanics of Isaac Newton was an established theory? And they'll look at you like deer in the headlights and say, well, they may not even know what you're talking about. At that point, you've lost a good fraction of the atheists. The answer is, yes, it was established theory, and it still is an established theory that applies very well in certain contexts. But it doesn't apply at very small scales, where quantum mechanics come into play, which is the work of not Nikola Tesla, sorry folks, Max Planck is the father of quantum mechanics. And at the very large end, it falls apart too because of the work of Albert Einstein, both of whom believed in God. Why? Because if you actually look at what is known, especially now, I mean, in the last 20 years, from the scientific world, you cannot come to any other conclusion than that there is some sort of intelligent, creative design going on. Not like in the Bible. Anybody who says, if you're not an atheist, you must be a Christian, you must be a Bible belter, is making an absurd assertion. If they think that's all it's about, they're as stupid as the most fundamentalist Bible belter there is. And they're being just as dogmatic and childish. You cannot defend something that doesn't fit available data. This is what science is all about, coming up with theories that fit available data and adjusting those theories to new information. Now, Rob, you ask, well, what is the available data that proves the existence of some system of creation? I'll tell you that. DNA. The discoverer of the DNA code, I forget what his name was, when he saw how complex it was and how amazing it was in terms of the design, that the blueprints that it left for not only a single species, but actually he realized, you know what, there's stuff here, they called it junk DNA at first, which we're not sure what it's for yet. And as they started looking at things more, they realized, oh, in order to make a certain protein, in order to have a certain feature, you have to toggle a number of bits. You don't just toggle one thing and all of a sudden the next creature that sprouts from that DNA grows wings. This is not how it works. If you actually look at the DNA code, you will find that there are genes for almost every possible combination of creature that we know of in humanity or another species that we are aware of in our planetary knowledge. Now, why would that be? Okay, well, let's say that there's another species that's more advanced than us and seeded the planet with panspermia, and that's how we got the first life here, and it was from somewhere else. Ah, okay, so you're saying an alien species created life. If their technology was that much more advanced than ours, why wouldn't you accept that they might be gods? Especially if there's plenty of evidence from the oldest archaeology that the earliest builders of the pyramids, of the Cyclopean walls, the megalithic constructions that we find on almost every continent, these strange walls built of bricks that have these weird shapes that only could be explained as, wow, that's exactly how I would make a wall if I had the technology to do it and I wanted to make it stand for thousands and thousands of years, even in the presence of earthquakes. This is how we have those walls in South America and are being found elsewhere around the world in areas that are earthquake prone. And they're still standing. And the newer walls from descendant civilizations, or civilizations just happen to move into the area and built on top of the past, are crumbling. The newer stuff is crumbling. It's poor construction, typical, normal bricks or just loose rock with rubble fill in between to make it a thicker wall. This is all the later construction. Okay, so this has led people to conclude that the first builders on the planet were either extraterrestrial or they had some kind of godlike powers, or maybe a combination of both. And there are some people that still think that we can come up with some magic voodoo technology that will allow us to use our thoughts to cut through rock. Maybe we can, but we certainly don't have that. There's some latent paranormal capability in some people in our species, but it's not a universal. The investigations into remote viewing, into telekinesis, etc., shows that, yes, there are some people that have a very limited ability to do those things. But it's not like this woo-woo cult of law of attraction, man. This is the new science. They just don't understand Tesla. It's absolutely insane what these people would come up with. That's so unscientific. And actually, there's a lot more science embedded in ancient writings, including the Bible, the Sumerian tablets, and the Vedas. All of the ancient traditions of history. And there's a whole bunch of science embedded in what we know of the Mayan civilization that gave us this calendar that showed a count ending in around 2012, which we talk about once in a while on this channel as well. Okay, so atheists out there, I'm not a Christian. I'm an omnist. There are some parts of the Bible that I find useful because it fits the narrative that I have been able to assemble from my own personal spiritual experience. And atheists, guess what? Use your noggins, use your logic. Just because you have not had any personal spiritual experience does not mean nobody else has. You may be Harvard PhDs, Princeton PhDs in your field, and you may not have ever had a spiritual experience. Why? I can tell you why, exactly why. Because you are a very young soul. And young souls, at least in recent times, I don't know if that means millions or even billions of years, but in times since virtual souls have been a thing, and we have been actually tweaking between universes as a result of our actions, so that what we are doing as individuals, our individual choices, don't muck with the experiments of a more senior creator. someone with a soul with a much higher level of consciousness than you. And this is essentially another area that materialist scientists get completely wrong. They think that they can prove that the brain is the source of all thought, that matter generates thought, and thought is the product. I'm sorry, that's exactly backwards, and it's provable. Thought creates matter, creates organization. How do I know? Look at anything humanity has produced. Any idea, any book, any music, any invention, any building. It was produced by thought before anything else, before stone one was lifted. In fact, your whole silly idea of atheism was produced by thought. Very bad thought. And here's the other thing, that anybody who could be so pompous as to proclaim atheism just because they don't like the religion, the culture that they were raised in, is an ass. Because they haven't even considered the other possibilities. It's not an either or. There's either one supreme almighty God, micromanager of the universe, or there's no God, okay? This is stupid. This is very, very stupid, childish, second grade logic. And I don't care what scientists I offend by saying this, it is true. And I defy you to prove it isn't. You can see all around you that groups of scientists created things like CERN, Fermilab, Lawrence Livermore Lab, the nuclear bomb. Would it have happened without that team, without all those creative thoughts that went into it? Probably not the same way, but maybe eventually would have, because if you apply enough spiritual power, brain power, consciousness power to a problem, it usually gets solved. And the essence of my omnism, which is not a religion only, it is a religion backed up by science and logic and philosophy. Okay? Those are all the pieces of what you have to have a useful belief. And this is another reason why atheists are so damn stupid. Because if you don't have some belief in a higher power, a more conscious and aware creator than you, this leads to the hubris that many scientists have, many world leaders have, that, oh, because I'm in my position of power and authority and expertise, I can do no wrong. I am a god. And if you talk to most militant atheists for long enough, you will come away with absolute certainty that they think they are God incarnate, at least in their own field. And they view anybody else who has, I mean, you only have to have a short argument with one of these folks on Facebook before they start quoting their PhDs, and I published this paper, I published that paper, and I've read 10,000 books on the subject, and blah, 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 blah. This is the defense of somebody who has no defense. If you cannot refute spirituality, the assertions of spirituality, and the most fundamental one is that thought creates reality. If you can't refute that, you have no ground to stand on to call atheism anything but as childish a belief as fundamentalist Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. Because all of those old traditional religions have holes. have holes in their story that cannot be filled in light of the latest discoveries in science, the latest discoveries in spirituality. What? You can't have spiritual discoveries? Bullshit. Look at the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson. Very, very painstaking scientific look into reincarnation. Read his case studies, thousands of case studies that he researched and checked into, and found that they could not possibly, these children that were studied, which is where past life recollections usually happen up to about the age of 6, and then seems like there's some switch that turns off for most people, and you don't remember anything after that point. I know that was true of me until my spiritual awakening. Up to about the age of 6, I had many spiritual experiences. I was sure I could walk out of my body, climb the walls, fly, do a lot of things which I can't do now. Not without maybe a little nudge. And as I've told you, that does not mean that spirituality is all a bunch of crap. Because the other area you can look into is near-death experiences. Literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people have had near-death experiences in the last 100 years, especially since we've been able to save so many people that are near death and resuscitate them. And there are commonalities in those near-death experiences and differences that you can draw conclusions from. And those conclusions mesh up with what I have personally experienced in my spiritual encounters. And that is that the problem with believing in, quote, God, is that, as even the Bible says, if you read the original Old Testament, gods created, not God. Elohim is gods, plural. And there are many, many gods mentioned in the Old Testament. Basically, every character who has an ending name of their name ending in El, Baal, Yael, Israel, Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, Azrael. They call them angels because they don't want to, it's kind of like, I mean, the Muslim solution is to call them jinn. You've got Allah, and then you've got all the land of the jinn. And maybe you've got some archangels too. I think they fit that into their narrative as well. But my assertion is that there's no reason to separate these from God, except to maybe, okay, these are lower in the totem pole. Because what is a god? A god is a being that has supernatural creative powers, or did. Maybe still does. But we don't see many of them in action on this planet. Does that mean they never existed? No. Absence of proof is not proof of absence. I'm sorry, scientists. This is another very important lesson of logic that you need to take to heart. Just because you haven't found a theory and been able to prove it does not mean that you get to negate it. And my work, what I am telling you about in this series and in my books, is a theory of spiritual science. Oh, but there's no such thing as spiritual science, Rob. Bullshit. How can I prove that? Well, look back at our history. Who were the first scientists? Well, that's kind of debatable, but the first scientists that get a lot of credit are some of the Greek philosophers: Archimedes, Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, who applied more or less scientific method to discovering knowledge. Were they atheists? Hell no. They did try to come up with scientific explanations of spirituality, and some of them actually came pretty close to my conclusion, which is based on my experience, that souls are not just human beings. It's not just a human construct, not just a made-up thing that we can change the definition of, as so many cultural Marxists think of sex and everything else that is natural. It is a fact. We all have a soul, and it is immortal. It does not die when you die, which means it's not your brain. It's not your body. Oh, but something dies when your body dies. Yes, because it's the oversoul of the whole body. And you have undersouls, souls at other levels of consciousness, living other realities, other incarnation realities, who are in charge of your brain and your heart and your other organs. And this is why almost everybody at some point in their life has this feeling of conflict between themselves and parts of their body. Now, most people are at least aware of the conflicts that come between heart and mind. Okay, the second thoughts we have about the person we're dating. The second thoughts we have about prioritizing career over family, etc. These are heart-brain discussions. It's not different parts of your brain arguing with itself. It's the heart-brain souls trying to influence the oversoul, who is the human part of you that gets to make the final decision, if it chooses. And it doesn't necessarily choose. Many people just let their heart or their brain run everything. And to a large extent, the folks that fall in the atheist claptrap are very heavily weighted towards letting the brain rule them. And people who become ruled by their brain tend to have a very unspiritual life. They tend to have a very poor appreciation for karma, a very poor appreciation for how what they do hurts others or could hurt others, which is why scientists have been prone to invent dual-use technology where the dark side of it dominates the light side. We had existential nuclear weapons before we had useful nuclear reactors that could generate enough power to power a city or a region. We had dangerous fission reactors before we developed clean fusion reactors. We're still working on that because nobody really wants to rock the boat of the energy scene by introducing something that's going to make electricity generation cheap and easy. And yes, there are many so-called scientists working for corporations who have a vested interest in making sure no technology gets out to the market that gives people cheap energy, cheap unlimited energy. They're scared to death of it. And this is a huge part of what's going on in the world right now. Some countries have a vested interest because they have no petroleum resources in promoting the lie of clean electric vehicles. This is bullshit. Any scientist who tells you the current electric vehicle technology is greener than state-of-the-art catalytic converter-equipped newer automobile that has all the enhancements that reduce emissions is lying to you. Especially if they're in a country that has its own hydrocarbon resources and has developed techniques to exploit them that are not damaging to the environment, or as damaging as the mining of lithium and other rare earth metals that are essential to today's current battery technology. Now, yes, there are many, many companies working on cleaner battery technology, but they're all pie in the sky right now. They're in prototype stage. Maybe, possibly, if Tesla gets a hold of one of them and really pushes his magic, you'll see one of them in a car in maybe 2 years. But not out of China. Because they don't want that stuff. They want this old lithium battery stuff because they have the market cornered on the heavy metals that were the most dirty to produce in the West. Oh, come and mine it over here. We'll send our teams of forced labor peons over there to mine it and live for the few years that they get to live until they start developing respiratory problems or falling over and dying. This is what's going on, folks. This is what corporate science, corporate leaders are sanctioning in the name of science. And I'll tell you, anybody that worships science to the extent that they make it their God over a God or gods or spiritual belief that has some understanding of divine retribution or karma, that those who do evil will be punished eventually, they are prone to do very, very dark and irresponsible things. And you have only to look at what has happened in the last 10 or 20 years to see proof of that. The pharma industry has an absolute horrible track record for coming out with products and pushing them through FDA approval that later prove out to be carcinogenic, to have huge health issues, to have manufacturing processes which are unethical, would not be allowed by the Geneva Convention. Experimenting with human tissue with fetal tissue is not something that is allowed. We don't do it in this country. That's why they're outsourcing it to China and Ukraine and wherever else they can hide it from Congress. I'm sorry, but atheism is a road to evil. And this is why I have no patience with atheists. I will argue till I'm blue in the face and prove just how wrong they are about their stupid, stupid belief. And it is a stupid belief. At least you could have the humility to admit agnosticism. Well, I don't know. I haven't seen personal proof. I'd have to see proof. And then start looking at the proof openly and honestly. And ask yourself, well, if reincarnation is a thing, why do we reincarnate? Why do we have life after life? Is it like the Buddhists say, oh, it's just this horrible punishment, this wheel of reincarnation that we have to get off because we're being punished and we have to get to nirvana? Okay, well, does that make any sense scientifically? No, of course not. What's the purpose of that? Why would that happen unless God was some evil genie that wanted to punish everybody until they, threw up their hands and said, God, give me nirvana. It's stupid. So stop doing it. The same thing goes for the one almighty God creator idea. It's stupid. We see all around us humans creating things all the time. You don't get to make that distinction of man-made or natural because humans are natural. Okay? We evolved naturally. Or if we didn't, we were genetically engineered by something else that evolved naturally. Or nature somehow came from the nature of whatever or whoever the creator was. Now, I can't force you to believe in karma. I can't force you to believe in an afterlife. But I can tell you one thing, that one of the biggest commonalities of near-death experiences, doesn't matter whether the people were Christian or atheist or Buddhist or New Age, spiritualist, cosmic oneness, nuts, or anything, whatever they believed, one of the key features is a life review and some sort of a guide that leads you through the experience. Might be physically apparent, might just be a voice that after you get this initial experience of love, light, bright light, oneness, which some people think is God, which is silly. Once you get past that to the heaven that you've been assigned, and this is another assertion that's part of what you have to conclude from accepting all the poles of spiritual experience from people who have had no reason to lie. There are many, many spiritual experiencers that are even afraid to talk about what they've experienced because they don't want to be ridiculed. They're not out making millions of dollars writing books, getting on talk shows and becoming famous. These are real people telling real truths. Just like some of the real people that came out and talked about the weird shit that they saw in the 2020 election. No reason to lie. It's cost them their jobs. It's landed them in mental asylums. It's gotten them killed. Where do you stupid idiots get off believing people that have reason to lie? Like the management and scientists of big pharma companies and their stooges in the FDA, the World Health Organization, the NIH, the CDC, who are all profiteering from this industry. There's a revolving door there that's exactly the same as the revolving door between the Senate and K Street. That's why so many people still run for office. They don't want to do a good job. They want to go take a few hits for the team and then go make a boodle on K Street after cashing in on their votes while they were in office. And this is the truth of how Washington, D.C. operates. That many folks who actually are well-intentioned are starting to reveal. That's why they hate Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, you may have been told she's a bonehead, idiot, religious person from the sticks and knows nothing about government. Well, I defy you to go listen to Tim Pool's interviews of her. Tim Pool is a very, very good journalist who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, was one of the reporters on Occupy Wall Street back in the day, and like me and many other people, after Bernie was proved to be a false flag and all the donations that he'd collected from all the cheering fans that liked his idea of progressivism, went straight to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Yep, this is the truth. And went straight into all the shenanigans that they pulled to try to discredit the Trump campaign and Donald Trump. I'm not a Trump fan. I didn't vote for him in 2016. I voted for Jill Stein. I did vote for him in 2020. And if there was no better choice, I would vote for him again. Because the establishment Democrat Party and all the fake progressives like AOC and the Squad are not, and I repeat, not American liberals or progressives. If you want to see a real liberal, you've got to go back about 100 years before communist agents started working in the United States. Because communism is as illiberal as fuck. Marxism is illiberal. What does liberal mean? Liber is Latin for liberty, libertas. You'll see on many coins proclaiming false flag Marxism in the Roman Empire. But liber is free. Liberal thought is free thought, not critical thought. Critical thought is Marxism. This idea did not exist in Western discussion until Marxists started infiltrating our education system and the media. Critical thinking is not free thinking. It is not open thinking. It is partisan thinking. It's exactly what corporate scientists are forced to do if they want to keep their jobs. They have to look critically at the work that they're assigned and think how they can do it in a way that won't get them fired or demoted or stuck in a back room somewhere scooping up animal feces. This is the truth of the corporate world that we're in. And this is why, many of you may not know this, corporations were not legal at one time. They were considered a very dangerous idea because it was an organization of people that had no beholding to the state, which at that time were kings and stuff, so they had their own problems. But also, by selling shares of the corporation, they effectively offloaded the risk onto the shareholders. And if you know the history of corporations, you will be aware that the first big economic disaster of Europe in modern times was the Dutch tulip craze. Anybody heard of that one? Bunch of speculators, they started marking and promoting the tulip as the perfect flower. Everybody had to have tulips. And of course, all the perfect varieties came from Holland because they figured out how to hybridize them and make different ones of different colors. And were very, very protective of the bulbs that produced the new varieties that were marketed as being the most popular. And there was this huge craze that happened throughout Europe where people just, all the rich and elite had to have the latest tulips. Until the whole thing crashed when somebody else realized, you know what? You can the bulbs come up every year, and you don't need to replant new ones every year. The fashions may change, but I like my garden the way it is. I'm not going to buy into this anymore. And what had been this fashionista growth market, kind of like what you see with iPhones and the latest brand name fashions and stuff, overnight, stuff that was pumped up to be 1,000, 10,000 times what it was actually worth, what it cost to produce, was no longer in fashion, or could be, was being sold by people who had last year's version and had started doing hybridization themselves and had their own new varieties. And literally, thousands of people lost everything they had because they'd invested, and people were buying these rare tulips as investments, very similar to how Chinese have been buying empty shells of houses that they don't really own. They've only got a lease on it for a period of about 70 years before they have to beg the government to renew it. This is insane. This is the kind of stuff that atheist thinkers Non-spiritualists will do, because they don't believe in God, and it also means that they don't believe in an afterlife. They don't believe in karma. They don't believe there's any price to pay for getting rich, no matter who you step on. Okay, I think that's fairly well covered this topic. I'm going to be doing some more in the next few days. Had a fair number of inspirations last night. They always come out of the difficulties and darknesses that hit my life. So I'll thank the light part of this inspiration, my daughter Eloise, who I'm worried I may never see again, for the inspiration of the next few segments. Since she is half Chinese, it reminds me to say, God bless the Chinese. I know what you're going through. I know there's some of you who have the sense enough to know that the Chinese Communist Party has got to fall sometime, or they are going to absolutely destroy not only your country, but the whole world. And for those of you, the students in Beijing and Beijing University, who are standing up and taking action, knocking walls down, finding ways through the Great Firewall, hats off to you. You are, whether you know it or not, the spiritualists of the future. Because if you've not learned anything from what I've been telling you, the real story of creation is a story about a conflict between two ideas of government. Government not of humans, government of souls. Between government by authoritarian mind control, you do what I say or else, which is power that old gods used to have. That's why they don't have those powers anymore, at least not when they've been touched by karma. Karma is a secret weapon of God, thought of by God, the first creator, but implemented by all of us through physical universes. Not one universe, started out with two, universe and anti-universe, which scientists on the leading edge have just started to discover evidence that conclusively proves we are part of a universe pair. The Big Bang was not a one-sided, lopsided event, like the silly first drawings of it were, that couldn't imagine there could be more than one universe. No, it was an expansion in two directions, just like you would expect from any explosion. Equal and opposite reaction. And those universes represented the two forces, spiritual ideas in play. One of them is the idea of God, the first creator, the first spiritual scientist, that all souls should have the opportunity for free thought, free will, to develop their own character, their own their own ideas of what they wanted to create, and find their own place in creation as the oversoul of some part of what was developing as the physical universes, which was essentially a big game. It's a training simulation for souls. Because a soul without an incarnation is a thought with no way to prove the validity of that thought. And this is how things were before creation started. You had a bunch of souls with different ideas of how to control and manipulate other souls, how to get them to work together, to think together, to work on the same problems, or to solve problems constructively. There was one team that thought, oh, there should be one high authoritarian senior soul who dictates everything and tells everybody what to do, what they can work on, what they can't, assigns them roles, responsibilities, and makes them serve the state, which is the the one dictatorial highest God, at least till somebody can knock them off. And this is essentially what I call spiritual communism, which is why if you believe in that kind of organization, you are essentially supporting the Borg side of the original argument. I call it an argument. You really can't call it a first sin because we don't know. Well, actually, we do know who committed the sin. It was the Borg side. And that's another thing I can tell you is that the battle is over. It's been proven conclusively through spiritual science, through creation, that authoritarianism is not the best way to organize anything. It is inherently brittle. It is inherently inefficient. It is corrupt as fuck and only serves to create static, brittle organizations that are very prone to be destroyed by the next natural disaster that comes along, which is exactly why all the previous versions of the Gaia experiment failed, had to be reset. The dinosaur extinction, the Permian extinction, the ice ages that ravaged civilizations, especially the end of the last ice age was a near extinction event. And there have been many of those, more than you're possibly aware of. It's gone on, this game has been going on so long. And the Earth has had to be resettled many times by other entrants in the line of God species, the chosen species of different phases of the experiment. This is how experiments work. This is how you go from a 4K 8-bit processor to the latest Intel chipset or AMD chipset. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens through generation after generation of idea, design, test, experiment, learn, repeat. And this is how creation works. It's an evolutionary process, which does not invalidate your worship of Darwin. It just mollifies it with the truth that Darwin's idea of natural selection was flawed. Yes, random mutation can cause evolution, and adaptations will tend to favor things that work in the current environmental situation. But in fact, they do not adapt quickly enough to catastrophic events like an end of an ice age in the matter of less than 1,000 years. Do the math. No species that was highly specialized to a far north climate and didn't have a migratory path when the ice age, or well, actually was in a place where they was habitable in the ice age, was in a place that wouldn't have been inundated by floods with the sudden melting of all the ice age glaciers, which is now becoming obvious to be what happened, not a slow gradual process like they used to tell you, and some people still quote as science because they don't keep up with real science. They just read the whatever they studied in high school and think it's still valid because science is a god. They're as dogmatic as anybody else. And I understand some of that. You can't keep up with the latest in every field. It's very difficult for a generalist like me to keep up with even a fraction of the latest. And that's why I'm constantly looking for new data, new experiments, new information, evaluating it versus other experiments, and drawing my conclusions about, well, was this a well-conducted experiment? Was it designed in a way that kind of already assumed what the answer was? If it was, I tend to reject it because that is what critical thinkers do. Critical thinking scientists already know what the answer is. That's what atheists are. They think they already know the answer to a question that if you sit down with them, you're going to flummox them if you're not approaching it from a Christian theologian standpoint, which is why they never debate anybody like me. Never. All the debates over atheism are between, I'm Mr. Atheist, I'm Mr. Billy Graham, blah, 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 blah. Sock puppet talks between two people that are both ninnies. Ninnies with a capital N. At any rate, I hope you weren't too offended by my violent speech here. I get a kick out of people when they start losing arguments with me. They call me violent. I'm just very sure of my arguments because I do my research. Whenever I engage in a discussion in social media, I do it by providing information. Most of my engagements are pointing out flaws in people's memes, flaws in people's arguments. And that's what's considered violent because analytical thinkers don't want to hear any other thought but their own echo chamber. And this is true of social media mavens. It's true of corporate scientists. It's true of tenured professors. It's true of 47-year career sellout politicians when they can still have a coherent day. It's true of politicians who have been using their position and power for, I think, in some cases, 6 decades to enrich themselves and their buddies through insider trading. And any of you who have done your research know who I'm talking about. At any rate, until they start destroying my channel, blocking me, censoring me, they send somebody to come pick me up and silence me. This is Rob Tromp for the Omnist Hour. I hope you enjoyed this and you'll come back for more. Like, share, subscribe, throw darts, debate. You can even call me names if you want to. I don't care. It's all water under the bridge to me. I'm not going to respond to gaslighting, name calling, because it just doesn't serve any purpose. I might just to tweak somebody a little bit. I kind of get a little perverse thrill out of tweaking some people who do this stuff and then pointing out, well, you're doing exactly what you accused me of. Gee, maybe you're projecting here a little bit. And but nothing ever phases these people. I mean, anybody who is stuck in any pole of critical thinking, and it happens not just on the left, it's on the right too. Don't think you guys haven't been programmed by your TV sets or your teachers. It's been going on for a long time. It's both right and left. And it's center. Because the power people, the power atheists, the power materialists that think they run the world, who don't appreciate karma, who don't understand what's going to happen to them at the end of their short life, which they cannot extend as much as they think they would like to through any amount of illegal experimentation, organ harvesting, and whatever in China. Well, they'll find out. And they're not going to win this in the long run. Even if they destroy this planet, the soul will go on. And their souls will go on to a very, very dark place where they will learn to respect karma. They don't call karma a bitch for nothing. Anyway, this is Rob Tromp for the Omnist Hour. Like, share, subscribe. Please share. If you think there's anything of value in here, even if you think this guy is nuts, share it with somebody that you think, oh, if I share with so-and-so, they'll completely blow him out of the water. I would dearly love a chance to debate an atheist. I've done it online, but it's much more fun in person. and it'll be really fun because they usually are very dour, sour people that don't have my sparkling personality and acting chops, comedic chops to make it very interesting. So I think it would be a fun engagement. At any rate, I've rambled for long enough. I'm going to go post this. Take care, folks.